The night my sister accepted an award for my art, she thanked the audience for recognizing her courage. She said she had always been the brave one. She was right about one thing: it does take a certain kind of nerve to stand in front of 300 people and accept credit for work you never made. I was sitting in the fourth row. I had the original files on a USB drive in my coat pocket. I had been waiting for this exact moment for 14 months. Let me start from the beginning, because the beginning matters. It always does. We grew up in a narrow house in a mid-sized city where the winters lasted too long and the summers smelled like cut grass and diesel from the highway 2 blocks over. My name is Mara. My sister's name is Lena. We are identical twins, which means that for our entire childhood, people looked at one of us and thought they understood the other. They were almost always wrong. Lena was the one who walked into rooms first. She was the one who laughed loudest at her own jokes and made sure everyone in the room had heard them. She could talk to anyone, sell anything, fill silence the way water fills a glass. People loved her. I understood why. She was genuinely magnetic when she wanted to be. I was the other one, the quiet one, the one who sat in the corner at family gatherings with a sketchbook in her lap, who drew the pattern on the tablecloth instead of talking about school, who noticed the way light fell through the kitchen window at 4 in the afternoon and felt something about it that she could not put into words but could put into pencil lines on paper. Art was the only place I was not shy. On paper, I was never quiet. On paper, I was enormous. Our mother used to say we were 2 halves of one person. She meant it as a compliment. It never felt like one. We shared a bedroom until we were 17. Lena's side had posters of bands and a mirror surrounded by photos of her friends. My side had a drafting table I had begged for as a birthday present, a lamp with a warm bulb, and stacks of sketchbooks going back to when I was 8 years old. I labeled every sketchbook with a date on the spine. I did not know then that this habit would one day save me. After high school, we both moved to the same city because our parents wanted us close to each other. Lena studied communications. I studied fine arts. We shared an apartment for 2 years, which was mostly fine and occasionally suffocating in the specific way that living with someone who knows every version of you can be. I graduated with a portfolio that my professors called exceptional. One of them, a woman named Helga, who had shown work in 4 countries, pulled me aside after the final critique and said, "Mara, you have a genuinely singular visual language. I want you to apply to the Aldrich Foundation Open Call. It is a national juried exhibition for emerging artists. The prize is €5,000 and a solo show." I went home and told Lena about it over dinner. She said, "That is amazing. You should absolutely do it." She refilled my wine glass. She smiled at me with the exact smile I had known since before I could speak. I did not notice anything wrong. Why would I? She was my sister. Here is something important about being shy and talented. The world does not come looking for you. You have to push the work out into it. And every single push costs something. Sending an email to a gallery feels, to someone like me, roughly equivalent to jumping off a bridge. I know that sounds dramatic. I am telling you, it is accurate. Lena knew this about me. She had watched me miss opportunities my entire life because I could not make myself step forward. She used to tease me about it gently. She used to say, "Mara, your art is incredible, but you are terrible at being an artist." She was right. And she used that truth against me in a way I still find breathtaking in its coldness. About 3 weeks after my conversation with Helga, I was deep in a new series. 6 large format pieces, mixed media, charcoal and ink wash, and fragments of old paper I had been collecting for years. The series was about memory and doubling, about being seen as a reflection of someone else, about the specific loneliness of being a twin. I did not tell Lena what the series was about. I did not need to. She could have looked at the work and known. I was uploading progress shots to my personal cloud folder the way I always did. I had been doing this since art school, partly for backup, and partly because I liked being able to scroll back through the evolution of a piece. Every file had a creation timestamp. Every upload had metadata. I did not think of this as documentation at the time. I thought of it as habit. I finished the series in late November, 6 pieces, each about 60 by 80 centimeters. I photographed them professionally, wrote a statement, assembled a PDF portfolio, and then spent 3 weeks trying to make myself submit it to the Aldrich Foundation Open Call. I did not submit it. The deadline passed. I told myself I would try again next year. I put the finished pieces in the flat storage rack I kept in the spare room, and I started something new. I did not tell Lena the deadline had passed. I was too embarrassed. She already knew. The first sign was small, and I almost missed it entirely. About 6 weeks after the Aldrich deadline, I was scrolling through Instagram late at night, the way you do when you cannot sleep, and you want to feel worse about yourself. I came across an account I had never seen before. The handle was @lena.creates. The profile photo was Lena, standing in front of a white wall with her arms crossed, looking serious and artistic in a way that made me smile a little, because Lena had never been serious about art in her life. I scrolled down. The third post stopped me. It was a photograph of one of my pieces. Not a photograph I had taken. A different angle, slightly warmer light, staged more carefully. But it was my work. One of the 6 pieces from the memory series. The caption read, "Finally sharing this. Sometimes the work that costs you the most is the work that matters most. Proud of this one. There were 412 likes. I put my phone down on the nightstand. I picked it up again. I put it down again. I told myself there was an explanation. I told myself I was misreading the image. I told myself that Lena had probably made something similar by coincidence, or that she had posted one of my pieces as a tribute, or that I was tired and my eyes were playing tricks. I went to the spare room and opened the flat storage rack. 5 pieces. There should have been 6. I stood there in my socks on the cold floor at 11:45 at night, and I looked at 5 pieces where there had been 6, and I felt something click into place in my chest that I did not want to name yet. I went back to the Instagram account. I scrolled all the way to the beginning. The account was 4 months old. It had started with abstract sketches, loosely rendered, clearly Lena's own hand. Not bad, actually. But then, around month 2, the work had shifted. It had become mine. The line quality, the subject matter, the specific way I used negative space. 3 more of my pieces appeared in the feed, photographed differently, captioned in Lena's voice. She had been building a following. She had 4,200 followers. She had been tagged in 2 local arts publications. One of them called her a rising voice in contemporary drawing. I sat down on the floor of the spare room. I did not call her. I did not text her. I did not do anything that night except sit with the information and let it become real. That was the moment I made a decision. I was not going to react. I was going to prepare. I want to be honest about the next few weeks because they were not clean or heroic. They were awful. I went to family Sunday dinners and watched Lena talk about her art practice with the fluency of someone who had been doing it for years. She used words I had used. She described processes I had developed. She talked about the emotional core of the memory series with the confidence of someone who had made it. Our mother said, "Lena, I had no idea you were so talented. Where did this come from?" Lena said, "I think I always had it. I just finally had the courage to try." I ate my soup. I did not say anything. I was keeping a list. I went home and I opened my cloud storage and I exported the metadata for every file in the memory series folder. Creation dates, modification dates, upload timestamps. The earliest files went back 14 months. Some of the preliminary sketches went back further. I printed everything and put it in a folder. I found my original sketchbooks. The series had started as drawings in a sketchbook, small studies of hands and faces and doubled figures. The sketchbook had a date on the spine, August of the year before last. I photographed every relevant page with my phone and backed the photos up to a second cloud account that Lena did not know about. I also had time-lapse videos. This was a habit I had started in my 3rd year of art school. I set up a small camera on a tripod above my drafting table and recorded myself working. Not for social media, just because I liked watching the work come together in compressed time. The videos were stored in a folder called Process, dated, labeled by piece. 6 videos, 1 for each piece in the memory series. Combined, they were about 4 hours of footage compressed to roughly 40 minutes. Lena had never made a time-lapse video. She had never sat at that drafting table. She had never held a piece of charcoal in her life as far as I could remember. I backed everything up twice. I sent copies to an external hard drive and to a second cloud service. I did not tell anyone what I was doing. I did not tell Helga. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell my closest friend, a woman named Petra, who had known us both since secondary school. I waited. The second layer of the betrayal came in February, and it was worse than the first. Lena called me on a Tuesday evening. She sounded bright and slightly breathless, the way she always sounded when she had good news about herself. She said, "Mara, I have to tell you something, and I need you to be happy for me." I said, "Of course." She said, "I submitted to the Aldrich Foundation, the juried exhibition. I know you mentioned it a while back, and I thought, why not? I have been working so hard this year. And Mara, they accepted me. I am in the exhibition. They might even shortlist me for the prize." I sat very still with my phone against my ear. She said, "I know it might feel weird because you mentioned it first, but you never submitted, right?" So I figured it was not a conflict. I said, "No conflict at all. Congratulations, Lena." She said, "You are the best. I am so glad you are not weird about it." After we hung up, I opened the Aldrich Foundation website and looked at the accepted submissions for the spring exhibition. Lena's work was listed under her name. The 4 pieces shown in the preview were mine. All 4 were from the memory series. The opening was in 8 weeks. I had 8 weeks. I called Helga the next morning. I told her everything. I was calm. I had the documents in front of me. I walked her through the timeline. The original sketchbook dates, the cloud metadata, the time-lapse videos, the progression of Lena's Instagram from her own work to mine. Helga was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Mara, I'm going to make some calls. You need to contact the Aldrich Foundation directly, but not yet. Wait until closer to the event and document everything again. Print it, date it, sign it." I said, "I already have." She said, "Of course you do." As the exhibition date approached, Lena became more and more herself in the worst way. She started posting behind-the-scenes content about her process. She posted photographs of sketchbooks that were not mine, filled with her own looser drawings, and captioned them as the foundation of the memory series. She gave a short interview to an online arts magazine. The interviewer asked her what the series was about. She said, It is about being a twin, about always being seen as part of a pair rather than as an individual, about the loneliness of being a reflection. She said this in an interview about my series, about my experience. The interviewer said, "That is so vulnerable. Did growing up as a twin inform the work?" Lena said, "Deeply. I think being a twin gives you a very specific relationship to identity. You are always asking, which one am I? The one who acts or the one who watches?" I read the interview 3 times. Each time I read it, something in me went very quiet and very clear. She was not even wrong. She had described my experience perfectly. She had just assigned it to herself. Petra read the interview and called me. She said, "Mara, this is strange. This sounds like you. This sounds exactly like things you have said to me." I said, "I know." Petra said, "Mara." I said, "I know. I am handling it." She said, "When?" I said, "At the opening." The week before the ceremony, I sent a formal submission to the Aldrich Foundation's Artistic Integrity Committee. I included all documentation, the metadata exports, the sketchbook photographs, the time-lapse videos, a written timeline with dates and sources, and a 2-page statement that Helga had reviewed. I did not hear back officially, but Helga told me the committee had convened an emergency review. The foundation's director was going to be present at the ceremony. He knew what was coming. He had agreed to let the ceremony proceed to a point before intervening, because the foundation wanted to handle it formally and on the record. The Aldrich Foundation Prize ceremony was held on the 3rd Friday of March, in a gallery space in the center of the city. White walls, track lighting, the smell of white wine and new paint. The kind of room where everyone is performing slightly. I arrived early. I wore a dark blue dress I had bought specifically for the occasion. In my coat pocket was the USB drive containing every piece of documentation I had assembled. Helga was already there when I arrived. She was standing near the back with a woman I did not recognize, who turned out to be a member of the Aldrich Foundation jury. Helga had made her calls. I found my seat in the 4th row. I put my coat over my lap with the USB drive in the pocket. I held the coat with both hands. Lena arrived 20 minutes later. She was wearing a cream-colored blazer, and her hair was done. She was with 2 people I did not know, friends from her communications world, and she was already performing. Bright voice, wide gestures, the laugh that filled rooms. She scanned the audience when she came in and found me and gave me a wave and a smile. I waved back. I smiled. She had no idea. The ceremony began. The foundation director gave a short speech about the importance of authentic artistic voices. I noticed the word authentic. I wondered if Lena noticed it. From the way she was leaning toward her friends and whispering something, I did not think so. 3 awards were given before the main prize. Then the director returned to the podium and announced the Aldrich Foundation Emerging Artist Prize. He said, "The jury was moved by a series of works that explore identity, doubling, and the loneliness of being seen only as a reflection of another. The pieces demonstrate exceptional technical skill and a deeply personal emotional core." Lena sat up straighter in her seat. The director said, "The prize is awarded to Lena Kaufman for the series titled The Mirror Half." Lena stood up. There was applause. She walked to the stage with the ease of someone who had been walking towards stages her whole life. She took the award, a heavy glass piece, and she held it and she smiled at the audience. She said, "Thank you. I want to say something honest tonight, because this work is about honesty. I have always been the loud twin, the brave one, the one who pushed forward. And for a long time, I thought that was a limitation of my art, that being bold meant being surface level. But this series taught me that bravery can go deep, that the courage to look at yourself clearly, to examine what it means to be half of a whole and also entirely yourself, that is the hardest kind of courage. I'm grateful to be recognized for it." She paused. She looked out at the audience with exactly the expression of someone who believes completely in what they're saying. She said, "I want to thank my twin sister, Mara, who has always inspired me." The applause started again. I stood up. I had not planned to stand up at that exact moment. I had planned to wait for the director to intervene, which was the agreed process. But when she said my name in that sentence, in that context, as a footnote to her own story, something decided for me. I stood up and I said, in a voice that was not loud, but was absolutely clear, "Lena, those are my pieces." The applause stopped. Lena looked at me from the stage. Her expression did not change immediately. It went through several phases very quickly. Recognition, calculation, and then the performance of hurt. She said, "Mara, this is not the time." I said, "I have the original files. I have the sketchbooks with dated entries going back 14 months. I have time-lapse video of myself making each piece in this series. I have cloud metadata with creation timestamps. I submitted all of this to the Foundation's Integrity Committee last week." The room was completely silent. The Foundation director stepped back to the microphone and said, "Ms. Kaufman, the Integrity Committee has completed a preliminary review of a formal complaint filed by Mara Kaufman regarding the authorship of the submitted works. We are pausing the award pending a full review." Lena said, "This is insane. These are my pieces. I made them." I said, The time-lapse videos are 40 minutes long. They show my hands, my face, my drafting table. You have never owned a drafting table. Someone in the audience said something I could not hear. A few people near the front were looking at their phones. Lena said, "You are jealous. You have always been jealous of me." I said, "I know you believe that." She said, "You are trying to ruin this for me because you could not do it yourself? Because you were too scared to submit? Because you are always too scared?" I said, "You are right that I was scared. You used that. You knew I would not submit and you waited, and when the deadline passed, you took the work. That is documented too. The Aldrich submission timestamp is 11 weeks after the deadline I missed. You waited to make sure I had not submitted first." Her face did something I had never seen it do before. It lost its performance. Underneath was something much smaller and much less certain. She said, "Mara, please." I said, "I am not angry at you right now. I want you to know that. I'm going to be angry later, probably for a long time. But right now, I am just done." I sat back down. The director asked Lena to step down from the stage and speak with the committee privately. She did not move for a moment. Then she moved. The next hour was the kind of organized chaos that happens when an institution realizes it has a problem and needs to manage it in public. The director spoke quietly with several jury members. Helga spoke to the Integrity Committee representative. I sat in my chair with my coat in my lap, and Petra, who had arrived partway through the ceremony and was now sitting next to me with her hand on my arm, said nothing, which was exactly right. Lena was in a side room with 2 foundation staff members. I could see through the glass panel in the door that she was crying. I did not feel triumphant about that. I felt tired in a way that went very deep. A journalist who had been covering the ceremony for an arts publication came and asked me for a comment. I said, "I would prefer to let the foundation's process speak for itself. I have submitted complete documentation, and I am confident in the outcome." She asked, "How long has this been going on?" I said, 14 months. She wrote something down. The USB drive was still in my coat pocket. I had not needed it in the room because the foundation already had everything, but I had wanted it close. It was a small, unremarkable black rectangle. I held it through the fabric of the pocket, and it felt heavier than it was. The formal outcome came in writing 3 weeks later. The Aldrich Foundation's Integrity Committee issued a finding that the submitted works in the category of the Emerging Artist Prize had been created by Mara Kaufman and submitted under a false name. The prize was rescinded. Lena's participation in the spring exhibition was canceled. The foundation issued a public statement on their website noting that the works had been misattributed and that the error had been corrected. The statement did not use the word theft. Legal language rarely does. Lena's Instagram account, @LenaCreates, lost approximately 2,000 followers in the week following the ceremony. Several of the arts publications that had featured her issued corrections or removed the articles entirely. The online interview about being a twin was taken down. The interviewer posted a brief apology. One gallery that had been in early conversations with Lena about a future show sent her a formal email withdrawing interest. She forwarded it to me without comment. I did not know what she expected me to say. Our mother called me 4 days after the ceremony. She had seen the foundation's statement online. She was crying, which I had expected. She said, "How could you do this to her in public?" I said, "Mom, she submitted my work under her name for 14 months. She said, "You could have talked to her privately." I said, "I want you to think carefully about what you just said." There was a long silence. She said, "I just mean it did not have to be like this." I said, "She accepted an award for work I made in a room full of people while I was sitting in the audience. She thanked me as an inspiration." Mom, I was as private as I could be for 14 months. I documented everything and I went through the foundation's official process. I stood up in that room because she said my name. Another silence. Then my mother said very quietly, "I know." She did not say anything else about it being my fault. Lena called me 6 weeks after the ceremony. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that was 4 minutes long. I listened to it twice. In the message, she said that she knew what she had done was wrong. She said she had told herself a story in which she was helping me, in which she was showing the world what I could not show them myself, in which she was braver than me, and that was a kind of service. She said she understood now that this was not a story about helping me. She said she was sorry. She also said, "You were always the talented one. I wanted to be the talented one just once." I sat with that for a long time. I did not call her back immediately. I needed more time than 6 weeks to be ready for that conversation. But I want to be honest, I heard her. I understood the logic of it, the specific hunger of growing up alongside someone whose gift you cannot replicate no matter how loud you are or how many rooms you walk into first. I understood it, and it did not excuse it, and both of those things were true at the same time. 3 days after the ceremony, while everything was still loud and strange, and I was still fielding calls from people I barely knew, Helga called me and said, "Mara, I submitted your portfolio to the Aldrich Foundation on your behalf. I hope that is all right. The spring exhibition slot that was freed up by the withdrawal of the misattributed work is available. The committee has already reviewed your documentation, and they know your work. They want to offer you the slot." I said, "Helga?" She said, "I know, say yes." I said, "Yes." The show opened on the first Friday of May. All 6 pieces from the Memory series, correctly attributed. My name on the wall, my statement on the wall, my face in the program. I stood in the gallery an hour before the opening, alone, and I looked at the work. I had not seen it all together like this since I had finished it. It looked different in this light, in this space. It looked like something a person had made with great care over a long time, about something that had genuinely mattered to them. I had a glass of water in my hand, not wine. I had wanted to be clear-headed. Petra arrived first. She walked in and looked at the work for a long time without saying anything, and then she turned to me and said, "Mara, this is extraordinary." I said, "I know," she laughed. I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed in weeks that did not feel like it cost me something. Helga arrived with the jury member I had met at the ceremony, and several of her colleagues, and a writer from a national arts publication who wanted to speak with me. I spoke with the writer for 20 minutes. I was nervous in the way I am always nervous, the way that makes my hands slightly cold and my voice slightly careful, but I did not disappear into the nervousness. I stayed present. I talked about the work, I talked about doubling and identity and the specific experience of being seen as half of something rather than as a whole person. The writer said, "Is the series autobiographical?" I said, "Completely." She said, "The title, The Mirror Half, is quite striking. Which half are you?" I said, "I used to think I was the reflection. I am not anymore." She wrote that down. More people came than I had expected. Some of them were there because of the controversy. Some of them were there because Helga had spent 30 years building relationships in this city's art world, and she had told everyone she knew that this show mattered. Some of them were there because the arts publication had run a short piece online that afternoon with the headline, "The real artist behind the Aldrich controversy opens tonight." I did not love that headline. I would have preferred one that did not require the word controversy. But I understood that this was how the world worked, that sometimes the story that gets people into the room is not the story you would choose, and that once they are in the room, the work speaks for itself. The work spoke. I watched people stand in front of the pieces. I watched them lean in. I watched a woman in her 50s stand in front of the largest piece for a very long time, and when she turned away, her eyes were wet, and she found me and said, "I am a twin. I have never seen my own experience in a painting before." I said, "I am glad it found you." At the end of the evening, after most of the guests had gone, and the gallery staff were beginning to quietly collect glasses, the foundation director came to find me. He shook my hand and said, "We are very glad to have the work shown correctly. And I want to tell you that the jury has been discussing the prize." I said, "The prize was rescinded." He said, "Yes, but the prize is awarded to the best work in the exhibition. The jury's view of the work has not changed, only the name attached to it." He looked at me. I looked at him. He said, "Congratulations, Mara." I held the glass award in both hands. It was heavy. It was warm from being held. I did not make a speech. There was no ceremony left to make a speech at. I just stood there in the emptying gallery with the award in my hands and the 6 pieces on the walls and Petra beside me, and I felt something settle in my chest that had been unsettled for a very long time. After everything was over, I went home and I took down the stack of sketchbooks from my shelf, the ones with the dates on the spines. I sat on the floor and I went through them from the oldest to the newest, looking at the drawings I had made from the time I was 8 years old. The tablecloth patterns from family dinners, the light through the kitchen window, the studies of hands and faces, the preliminary sketches for the memory series, small and uncertain, and then less uncertain, and then decided. Every sketchbook had my handwriting on the spine. Every page had my hand in it. 14 months of someone else claiming this, and here it was, entirely mine. It had always been entirely mine. That was the thing Lena had not understood when she took it. You cannot actually take someone's work. You can take the credit and the visibility and the prize money and the followers. But the work itself, the fact of having made it, the knowledge in your hands, the way you see, the specific angle of your particular life that makes you make the things you make, none of that transfers. She had the pieces. She never had the practice. I put the sketchbooks back on the shelf. I turned off the light. I started a new sketchbook the next morning. I am telling you this story because I spent most of my life believing that being quiet meant being less, that the loud version of a person was the real version, that bravery looked like walking into rooms first and filling silence and selling yourself to every stranger you met. I believed this even though I had evidence every day that it was not true, evidence in the form of work I made that moved people, that a woman at a gallery opening recognized as her own experience, that a jury of professional artists called exceptional. I believed it because Lena was right there, being loud, and I was right there, being quiet, and the world noticed her first. Here's what I know now. The world noticed her first. It noticed me eventually. And what it noticed when it finally looked was real. I am not the mirror half. I never was. I was just the one who was standing slightly to the side, watching the light. That is where all the best drawings come from. The USB drive is still in my coat pocket. I do not need it anymore, but I have not taken it out. Some habits are worth keeping.